Welcome to Open Range. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Going to be talking to Dustin Gawrylow, Managing Director of the Watchdog Network. Have him on regularly talking to a variety of things that are going on across the state, specifically things with the CO2 pipeline and the Bismarck area, Extra Territorial Zones. We're going to talk about some of that and a number of issues that he's been watching, and talk a little politics of what's going on around the state. So Dustin, once again, welcome to Open Range.
Good to be here.
So Dustin, let's just dig right in. We're going to share a little later your website so people can sign up for your Substack. So let's just talk about that just briefly a little bit so people can follow you. I know you've built a pretty big following out there. Let's talk about that real quick.
Website's watchingnd.com, and we have all of our posts are up there, and you can sign up on a monthly basis at $8 a month or $80 a year, depending on where you want to be and how committed you are to supporting this work. I've been doing a lot more what I would call pure journalism work on there lately, simply showing data and documenting what's been happening on these various issues that I've worked on in the past, and now things are finally coming to fruition on a lot of these things that have been long-term projects for me.
Well, you know, I think, Dustin, what's been good, I mean, you have, what I appreciate your columns and what you do is you've been at this long that you bring a context. It's like when I've had Dale Wetzel on doing stuff on the show periodically. It's been a while, but Dale brings that Associated Press 30 years background that he helps fill the holes in. Sometimes you just read a story on the up front, you don't quite get it, but you need that backstory. And many times you've been writing about this stuff for 3-4 years, and it starts coming to fruition, and you begin to start getting a better feel for it, so you can help fill in that gap a little bit. And so let's just start out with the CO2 pipeline and what the state's done. You had a recent article about that. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, today put out on Watching ND, basically I was pointing out an article that the North Dakota Monitor had put together where they were reporting that the state indeed on the Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline did get better terms for their CO2 sequestration program. And a lot of those better terms were things that landowners have been asking for from Summit in this whole process and just have not been able to get. And I was making the case that, you know, the state of North Dakota spent a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of manpower on promoting carbon sequestration and this pipeline in particular. You know, we saw Drew Wrigley threaten to sue South Dakota because they had the audacity to pass laws to protect their landowners. And, you know, with all this effort that the state has put in, there's been very little effort on the public relations side of it to make sure that landowners and residents who have concerns about this project are taken care of when it comes to the easements on their land. One of the big things that has been an issue for North Dakota landowners that have been given these notices is the insurance liability side of it, and wanting to know that if something goes wrong on their land, that not only will they not be held accountable for what the pipeline did, but that their losses will be paid for. There's a lot of landowners that have gotten notices from their own insurance companies saying that they would not be covered, say, if they lost 100 head of cattle because there was a CO2 pipeline explosion on their land and it suffocated their animals. And so this company and the state of North Dakota have been promoting this concept for so long, but they really haven't done a lot of work on making sure people are comfortable with the project to begin with. And now we find out that the state land board, when they were putting together their agreements on their lease land and selling their easements, they got those commitments and guarantees from the company that the state would not be held liable, and that if there were lawsuits, that the company would actually defend the state so that the taxpayers aren't on the hook. And so my contention is that the state should have, if they really wanted this project to go, looked at how to make sure that the company would cover the people, as well as they were making sure the company would cover the state.
So when you take a look at that, I mean, the last legislative session leading up to it, the last 2 to 4 years, the oil industry has been all in on this, and they've been. This is going to help do more oil recovery, enhanced oil recovery, and on and on and on. And I don't disagree with that, but the reality is this CO2 pipeline the goal is to put it in the ground, not to be used for
Right.
sequestration, because the tax credit dollars are so much higher, and it's a money game, a shell game of taking this free government money that taxpayers are subsidizing, sticking CO2 in the ground, when we ought to be putting it in the air, as far as I'm concerned, and helping plants grow better and trees grow better, which is just absurd where they're at with some of this.
Yeah, you know, and I've said all along that if this project was genuinely for enhanced oil recovery, those of us that have had criticisms and opposed it for various reasons, both on the right and the left, I don't think that we would have nearly the success and effectiveness if it genuinely was for oil production, because, you know, I certainly would have much less of a problem with it if that was the goal, but that's not the goal of this particular project. That may be the goal of the industry long term, but it's not the goal of this project.
So can you talk us through just a little bit for the viewer out there that doesn't understand the dollars related to the tax credits, and just give them a little bit of that context of that, because I mean, who doesn't want us to get more oil out? It helps jobs, landowners, you know, mineral right owners, state tax dollars, legacy fund, on and on and on. But the fact that this is a shell game to just get tax credits and bring CO2, which as I understood all along, this is what they call food grade CO2. So it's actually really good CO2 that's being, if you will, I don't want to say wasted, but once it goes in the ground, they can't pull it back out and reuse it. It's done and it's down there. And so explain the tax law with that.
Yeah, so prior to the big beautiful bill, the dynamic was that if you wanted to pipe in CO2 to use for enhanced oil recovery, the tax credit that you could get was $50 per metric ton. But if you wanted to pipe it in and just stick it in the ground for sequestration and bury it, as we say, it's $85. So literally, it's got as far as the federal government has been concerned, based off of both bills that President Trump signed in his first term, as well as President Biden in the intermediary years, just burying it and wasting it was more valuable to the federal government than actually using it for enhanced oil recovery. That's why Summit did not pursue that side of it, because the credits pay out more if you just throw it away and cover it up rather than use it for something productive. And so now the dynamic during the big beautiful bill, they brought that $50 level up to the $85, but because Summit's whole plan was to pursue the sequestration, they've got all this paperwork out there saying that that's what they were going to do. In order to switch horses, they would have to go and completely start over. And my understanding is that a lot of the green investment fund money that was willing to put it in for the sequestration may not be there if it was for enhanced oil recovery, because those green funds are precluded because they're ESG funds from promoting oil production.
So if the Congress changes that, I guess that would fix that, just like they took the $50 to the $85. And if the pipeline is here and CO2 is going down it, and they just say, hey, it's going to go to the Bakken, I mean, that's very viable. And I guess ultimately, many of the investors are oil people, you know, Harold Hamm being one of them. That may very well be the case. It's just, you know, we're going to pivot and go to the next phase if that's what ended up happening. Because I guess, I mean, the science is there that it does enhance it. It's just a question to how to really optimize it. I know UND's been working on that. And so they're trying to sort through all that whole process.
Right, and you know, a couple of years ago, there was a conference event over at BSC Energy Center, and I recall that Ron Ness himself said that they're 7 to 12 years out from really using this at large scale. And so there is not they cannot immediately use this if they had it, because they haven't gotten the science up to speed and the engineering up to speed quite yet. Now, the problem is, even if that's where they go next, they're going to still have to sell it, this concept of bringing the CO2 from Iowa through South Dakota, because South Dakota has taken a hardline position, period. Their law does not actually consider the different uses of it, because what they did was they confined and restricted the definition of public use and common carrier to the point where the company would have to meet a new hurdle of proving that this is for public good and common good. And so with enhanced oil recovery, that's a lot easier than with sequestration, but they would still have to lobby South Dakota to allow for this sort of thing to happen, even if that was what the plan was. So this is also a very good example of a lack of long-term strategic planning, because they were so quick and hard to push this that they ended up pushing South Dakota away. And now in order to make anything work, they're going to have to come up with a totally new strategy, totally new sales pitch, and calm people down.
Well, you know, I think so much what happened is it was that whole bullying effect. And then, of course, they made a strategic mistake. When someone signed, they immediately paid it. Mm-hmm. So there were billions spent that people are never going to recover it. We come back, I want to talk a little bit about Iowa and about the idea that, hey, we don't think it needs to go to North Dakota. We're going to send it somewhere else. I know you've written about that. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking to Dustin Gawrylow, Managing Director of the Watchdog Network. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Stop out to our facility, Highway 22 South. Let us build a truck for you.
Hello and welcome to the MHA Interpretive Center. It's the perfect stop along the Lewis and Clark Trail and the cultural hub of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. Nestled along the shores of Lake Sagagawea in Newtown, North Dakota, 1 mile west of the Four Bears Casino. You can enjoy amphitheater performances, art exhibitions, and educational workshops utilizing our Living Cultural Center. Enjoy some coffee, browse our gift shop, and learn about the original people of this land. Learn more at mhanation.com/interpretive center.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza.
Home on the Range offers a nurturing place for teens who may have just come from an unsafe or traumatic environment. Here, they receive therapy and education services centered around animals, and the surrounding nature provides opportunities for work, fun, and healing. Life skills learned at Home on the Range are carried with residents when they return to the community with new talents and a greater appreciation for themselves and others.
Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
West River Equipment of Mandan is here to help you maintain peak productivity in your operation. As an authorized dealer for many high-quality equipment lines, we have the new and used equipment it takes to make your farming, ranching, or construction operation profitable and efficient. West River Equipment also has the parts on hand and the experienced technicians in our shop to get your equipment back in action fast. Find what you need at West River Equipment on Old Red Trail in Mandan.
Welcome back to Open Range, talking to Dustin Gawrylow of the Watchdog Network. So Dustin, we were talking about the CO2 pipeline and how the state negotiated a better deal for themselves. And I still want to talk about that a little bit further. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about Iowa. And I just saw a new announcement where Iowa and Summit have kind of come to some terms about, hey, we can take it somewhere else. We don't need to take the CO2 to North Dakota. And a lot of people, I think, are going, hooray. But on the other hand, some landowners are probably saying, hey, I was holding out to get a big payday. So talk to us about that.
So Summit ended up buying a pipeline in Nebraska called Tallgrass, which is a old natural gas pipeline. And so my understanding of what they're planning to do now and what they've asked Iowa is to allow them to repurpose that pipeline. And of course, with that pipeline comes the existing easement around that pipeline. So they would be able to upgrade it, expand it, put new pipe in without having to go through a big fight, because that company already owns that easement, so they can go in and upgrade it within the terms of those existing contracts. And so right now they are proposing that they would move that CO2 from Iowa into Wyoming to be sequestered in Wyoming, because Wyoming also is one of the states that has obtained from the EPA the ability to self-regulate CO2 sequestration. And they implemented their policies in Wyoming in a way that it is about the same as North Dakota's, but because they can go through Nebraska on this existing easement pipeline right away, it would make it a lot easier. So then they don't even have to deal with South Dakota, at least now, for now. And of course, there's been rumors that once it goes into Wyoming, they could pipe right from Wyoming back up from the west into western North Dakota if they wanted to bring it into the oil fields and still avoid South Dakota. They'd just have to deal with a little sliver of Montana.
So they have to then, obviously they have to eat those sunken costs. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about numbers. Do you know some of the numbers? I mean, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars for this pipeline. Do you ever heard the total dollar amount that was going to be?
So when the project started, the number that was being quoted on the construction and acquisition of rights was about $2 billion total. The last number that was being touted was $5.5 billion total cost. So we don't really know what the true numbers are, because it's like anything else. As things got drawn out, they started looking at what they would end up paying long term. We don't know, so we don't really know a lot of the hard numbers there, because whenever there's an investment project, you don't really know how much of that is real and how much is fluff. What landowners have received already for their easements, say in South Dakota, for those that did agree to sell, a lot of that is confidential. They sign non-disclosure agreements, so technically they're not allowed to say within that time period. However, it's our understanding that a lot of those agreements do have dig-by dates, where if they don't dig and put something in, that easement is null and void. The landowner keeps the money, and then if the company wants to come back in later, they got to pay again.
Wow, that's incredible. I had reached out to some people that had some numbers, and I recall the numbers were something like they're paying $750 to $1,200 a rod, which is 16.5 feet. And I think if they went 20 foot wide, the number was, $1,250. So you'd get at a quarter of land if you had the length side of it, because of the way the quarter would be on one side, it'd be like half it. That they were getting a couple $100,000 for that quarter of land for the CO2 pipeline, mm-hmm. and paying up front, and then never getting anything done. So those numbers add up pretty quickly. And I used the number of a couple hundred. I said a couple $100 billion. It was, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking. It's more like 5 to maybe could hit 10. Who knows? But your point is they may skip South Dakota, come across to Wyoming, come up in western North Dakota, and still get the CO2, and they just have to work their way back into North Dakota.
Right.
Other than going east to west, they're going to have to go west to east to get it to where they're going to put the land.
And by buying a company that has the rights to go through the entire state of Nebraska, they can do that. I mean, I think that if they had to start from scratch in Nebraska, that strategy would not be there, because they'd have to go through this whole fight down there. And actually in Nebraska is where ironically, there's a lot more environmentalist impact rules and organizations that have a lot of clout down there. And so it would be a lot more difficult for them to try to do a bypass that way than otherwise. So they ended up buying a pipeline and the rights that go with that. And so I think it appears from the outside that is their plan at this point.
Just pivoting a little bit, I'll stay with CO2, but I want to talk a little bit about natural gas. I'm trying to get Justin Kringstead on the Pipeline Authority for the state of North Dakota. He's been on a few times before, but the whole gas going from Dubacan to eastern North Dakota, I mean, they kind of got to go through that whole thing, but it's a little different when gas goes versus taking CO2, isn't it?
Yeah, because there's not a fight over whether this is a true public use, because the goal is to get it to homes. And as long as there's homes and businesses at the end of the pipe, there's no debate over that. Plus, natural gas is a traditional true energy source, and it's more of a traditional fight over the easements than this is its own unique thing because it was the first of its kind.
And so when you take what they did during the legislative session, I mean, my perception is there was a lot of bad PR, bad management, strong-arm tactics, threatening, and legislators just rolled over because I don't know why they just rolled over so quickly, because we really weren't getting any money for enhanced oil recovery, and the pressure during the legislative session was probably the most intense piece of legislation that I saw people being talked about. Would that be a fair analysis?
Yes, because I think that ultimately the goal was that the 45Q tax credits were only going to be in place for 12 years. That's the lifetime of the 45Q. And so once that was to expire, so let's say they would start pumping in January 1st of 26. They get the tax credits through January 1st of 2038. In 2038, then they can repurpose that pipeline and send it on down the line for enhanced oil recovery. So this whole thing is, as you said, a shell game of using the sequestration part of it to basically pay for the pipeline and then later use it for something else, presuming that there's enough demand for the oil in the first place to require all that, which right now, the way that the oil markets and supply structure are, North Dakota needs to be producing oil more than the world needs it right now. I mean, we're watching the oil prices at $56 as of yesterday, and Bloomberg is saying that it'll probably be in the 40s by the middle of winter here. So it might be good to have Eugene Grainer on to talk about where things are going there and how that could ultimately force the price of natural gas to go up, because if it's less economical to get the oil, then it's also less economical to get the natural gas, and natural gas prices can go up while oil prices are going down. But I think that because they were somewhat disingenuous about what they were doing here, and because they used the sequestration and the green credits as a cover for the project and how they were going to pay for it without really being fully transparent about that, they dug themselves a hole. Like at every turn, Summit has essentially written a book on how not to do things. Like every single step in this process has been like a textbook example of how not to build a pipeline from a public relations standpoint. And I would guess that even some of their people would agree with that, because it's obvious they did not expect any pushback in South Dakota. They were not prepared there at all. They had North Dakota locked down. They had their influence, their lobbyists, and their people in North Dakota, everybody locked down, because if you're against it, you're against oil. Well, oil's not a big thing in South Dakota. So what they did was they thought that they treated South Dakota as flyover country, is what they essentially did. They treated it the same way as the East and West Coast liberals treat it. Well, they've shown that if they don't do their due diligence in those states that they are not going to make money off of, they might have a problem if the people rise up. And when you get a bunch of right-wing Trump conservatives and a bunch of left-wing Bernie socialists together and they can agree to do something, they can actually cause some trouble.
Well, they're both part of the big populist movement that rallies people to get involved that haven't been involved before. Mm-hmm. And when you get a mass of people like that pushing an agenda, they have to take notice to it. And they just the arrogance of understanding that everybody, whether you're legislator or the governor, you serve at the will of the people. And they're used to just doing whatever they want to. And I mean, in the case of North Dakota, I mean, God bless the oil industry. It's been fabulous for so many people. So I don't like to ding them, but sometimes they don't want anybody talking negatively. And I just have seen this landowner fatigue out west, where they're just so tired of somebody calling about, hey, what about this? And they're going, I just want to farm my land, you know. And for those that are sitting with millions of dollars in the bank, it's easier for them to say that. But if a guy across the street that doesn't have mineral rights, they maybe wouldn't mind enjoying some of that revenue that would come from the oil industry. So that's been really a challenge with it. So, well, we're going to go to the break, and I want to talk when we come back a little bit further about the disingenuous, and maybe it's not fair for the state, because I'm going to try to get, I think it's Joseph Herringer, who's a land commissioner, try to get him on the show just to talk about what he does, but also this story in itself, because, I mean, the state should do what they should do to protect their interests, but not to make it even a little bit more available so that the general public, these landowners, guys that feel they've been abused and disrespected in so many ways is really important. So we've been talking to Dustin Gawrylow of the Watchdog Network, Managing Director. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson is a family-owned dealer with expert staff that know their products front to back. We stock over 150 units of all types and can custom order a trailer with the unique features and capabilities you require for brands you can trust. Our experienced service team is the reason we're also the best place to have your trailer customized or repaired. Count on Base Flug Trailers of Dickinson to keep you hauling.
Come on in and experience small-town hospitality and the personalized care that makes car buying a pleasure.
We know that every journey starts with the right car. Whether it's school drop-off, weekend road trips, or your daily commute, we have the right vehicle for you and your family.
With trusted brands, affordable prices, and a team that treats you like family, finding your next car has never been so easy.
We pride ourselves on personal attention and quality service. The Set Motors, where our customers send their friends.
Yeah, U.S. Cattlemen is a member organization that each member has a vote in anything we do with policy. We're representing the independent cattleman or the cow-calf guy or an independent feeder or whatever. We like to support the independent producer. Talking about mandatory ID, we're talking about cool, we're talking about all the legislation that's going to be coming down with the new administration. There's going to be lots of moving and shaking, so always check us out at our website, uscattleman.org.
I'm $27,000 in credit card debt.
Okay. You have to radically do something different, because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting.
Now's not the time to be doing math. The time to be doing math was when we didn't go into $200,000 of debt.
If you are freaked out and you're stuck in these debt payments and you think it has to be a part of your life, it doesn't.
We are Ladies of Another View. Join us every weekday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. as we discuss the big topics from North Dakota, the nation, and around the world.
We chat with everyone from celebrities and medical professionals to politicians, local business owners, and neighbors about the topics and stories that affect all of us.
We are unscripted and uncensored real news from real people. So join us every weekday morning for Ladies of Another View on Beck.
Welcome back to Open Range. I'm your host, Gary Emineth, talking to Dustin Gawrylow, Managing Director of the Watchdog Network. So Dustin, just to kind of wrap up the idea of what the state did, it was really not necessarily like they got more money, but it was really a function that, as I understood the article, was about liability, exposure, risk, that the state put the pressure on to defend them. That was really more the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, the land board that is responsible for curating and being the custodian of state lands was able to negotiate better terms and conditions for the easements that were going to be on state lands. So just to clarify, it wasn't their it was not the land board's negligence for not developing a better strategy to get a better deal for the private landowners. It would have been the negligence of the other state agencies that have been in support of this project, specifically the State Industrial Commission, which, you know, they've spent $300,000 to create this whole public relations campaign with commercials and radio ads and working with a certain person that we know to promote this idea in the state. So it would have been more so their responsibility, since they're the ones that want the project to go.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit. So a while back, we had I had Mike Connolly on, and also Steve Bakken, County Commissioner for Burleigh County, and Mike Connolly, City Commissioner from Bismarck, talked about the ETZ. Talk about that and give us the context of just not Bismarck, but the whole extraterritorial zoning issue, because you fought that, been in the middle of that, you know, whether the Renaissance zones, but you've been involved in that in the Burleigh County area, you know. So help the viewers to understand kind of more, but from a higher view, generically, what that all means.
So Extraterritorial Zoning Authority, and I call it ETA, some people call it ETZ, but it basically is a state law that says that cities are allowed to regulate and zone land that is outside city limits. And the idea is that land and property that is eventually going to be in the city needs to be planned and developed as if it already is prior to it being annexed, which in theory that sounds good. Where the problem falls through is the fact that this results in what I've deemed years ago to be regulation without representation, because the people outside the city limits that are under the authority of city zoning and permitting rules can't vote for the people that are in government in the city. They can't vote for the mayor or the city commissioners. And so ultimately, it's kind of like taxation without representation, but it's regulation without representation. And so I first was introduced to this problem and issue back in 2011 when Dwight Wrangham was still in the House, and this was one of his pet issues that he had worked a long time on, particularly when he was the chair of the House Political Subdivisions Committee. And ultimately, cities, it's kind of depending on size, cities have the ability to go out of their corporate limits and either to a 2-mile or a 4-mile limit. In Bismarck and Burleigh County, because this has been such a long-standing issue, they, many years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, created a joint powers agreement where the city would limit its exposure to the ETA to a 2-mile limit, and then they would work together on the other 2 miles so that it wasn't just the city doing that. What now has happened in the last 6 months since City Commissioner Mike Connolly provoked this latest fight, and I use that term provoked intentionally because they did not want to do this. The city did not want to go down this road. In fact, they voted against going down it at their May meeting, and then in June they changed their mind and said, okay, let's go down this road. And ultimately what happened was that after several meetings, including I had one with Commissioner Connolly and some of the city staff, we encouraged and convinced them that it's in their best interest to look at what areas in that ETA does the city even want to grow out into and annex eventually? Which areas are just not a good fit for it, whether it is elevation or wetlands, flood, you know, or just the fact that it is a fully developed community like Misty Waters area where, you know, if it was in the city, nothing would change. So there's no point in them being in the city. And if they're happy with where they're at, just leave them there. So ultimately, they really, I think, did a good job of whittling it down to the point of being willing to give up half of that 2-mile zone, which accounts for 95% of the residents. So essentially, you have about 5% of the people that were impacted by regulation without representation still there. and those need to be addressed probably on a one-on-one basis. And then the rest of it is raw land. Some of those people may own that raw land, other non-residents may own. That has to be resolved, but that can be treated, it's easier to deal with raw land than when you're dealing with somebody who has a house and they just want to build a garage there the way that they want to build it. And so ultimately, I think the city has done itself a huge favor, and the city staff, obviously, by coming up with this plan, they realized that there's just certain areas and certain people that they don't want to deal with if they're not going to be in city limits and fully annexed, paying tax and all that. And even if they were, it probably would be a detriment to the city because there'd be long-term liabilities that the city would have to then pay for and special assess out, that there's not enough population density in some of these areas to cover. And so the county commission reluctantly took this proposal from the city, which was also reluctant, and they accepted it with some caveats. The county wants to have full control over the Missouri Valley Fairgrounds, which I'm on that committee for. We just had a meeting today about wetlands. And so ultimately, in the last 6 months, the city of Bismarck and Burleigh County have made more progress on fixing this problem for 95% of the people impacted than in the previous 30 years combined.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that's great when government's working that way, because when I interviewed Mike and Steve Bakken, the idea that struck me was, you know, so I'm a resident, I live out in the country, and I have a shop, and I have a dirt floor, and I just put my boat in there, whatever that would be, and all of a sudden, hey, if you're in the city, you got to have that concreted, or maybe you have to have a sprinkler system, or maybe you got to have curb and gutter, and say, no, the reason that came out here is so people are out there, and then they want to make an adjustment to land they've already owned or invested in, and they may not have the means to it. Maybe they stretched getting there, and so sometimes the cities, you know, I can appreciate the city, you know, fighting their battles to protect the interest of it. But my gripe of government, city, county, whatever, is they go to these national conferences or, you know, somewhere in Boston or someplace, which they go out and have a great time, and God bless them to go out and learn things. But they bring back these regulations that just don't fit in North Dakota, but they want to keep improving. Well, those aren't always improvements from my perspective, and that's the rub, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this also plays into a lot of the long-term policy changes that I've been pushing at the city level with regard to greenfield development, how we subsidize growth that doesn't pay for itself long-term and becomes a burden for the rest of the city. You know, by eliminating big chunks of that outlying area, it allows the city to better plan for where it wants to grow and ensure that that growth pays for itself. Because we have a major problem in Bismarck, which is we have all this outward growth that even though that property is worth a lot of money, they're very expensive, nice houses, it's not necessarily enough to pay for the cost to get there. That's why we have the sales tax that was implemented in 2018 to pay for 43rd Ave and 57th for those outlying areas, because we don't have a handle on making sure that the growth is enough to actually pay for it. There needs to be more density. There needs to be more tax dollars coming from every square foot as you grow out in order to maintain. So for every mile that you expand the city, those square feet need to generate more and more tax just to break even. Otherwise, the existing population ends up subsidizing the growth. And when the growth is what are considered to be high-end homes, and you know, in Bismarck, we just hit the point where a new build home, the average cost is $400,000. When people in the center of town have a $200,000 home and they have to pay higher sales tax to pay for the arterial roads to get out to the people that have $400,000 homes, eventually that's going to cause a lot of anger and resentment when people figure out that that's what's actually happening. And so Bismarck needs to get out ahead of this. And we've been talking about it for 10 years. This is part of what the Special Assessment Task Force was all about starting in 2017. You know, part of why we want to change the way that road maintenance is paid for out of monthly fees rather than special assessments. All these things work together, but we still have not gotten to the point where there is a large-scale strategic look at this to really get a handle on it. And by eliminating some of those areas where it can grow, I think it will allow the city to better hone in on what it will take to make sure that those future growth areas do pay for themselves and don't become a burden for the existing citizens.
So this is Bismarck, Burleigh County. Is there, what do you think's going on in Minot? And we'll skip the West Coast. We only got about a minute, but and maybe we could talk about that when we come back from the break. Why don't we do that? Because I'm thinking, you take what's going on in Fargo, and you have Grand Forks and Minot, and you have a pretty conservative city commission now in Minot who, I think have made some interesting progress on some things related to the way city government operates, and pooling all this money and sitting on it. And Western North Dakota, I think, is a whole nother monster that you have to speak differently. So I want to talk a little bit about if you know of anything going on across the state or how to get the word out to those other cities. So we've been talking to Dustin Gawrylow of the Watchdog Network. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. I want to tell you, Lady Blue and I, we got a lot of miles together, but you know what? You and I got a lot of miles together as well. And all I want to do is bring to you the information on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations. So I'm going to continue to travel the world and unearth the stories that make it possible that we can live in a free United States of America.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza. Are you dealing with arthritis, nerve and back pain, dry skin, or superficial wounds, but found no relief? Give Stewart's Natural Health a try. For over 4 decades, Stewart's Natural Health has been helping people and animals with herbal and natural oil lotions, ointments, and creams with a mission to help you relieve pain and feel your best using the power of nature. Discover the safe, drug-free solution to your pain, guaranteed or your money back. Visit stewartsnatural.health today.
We are the St. Mary Sisters. We are building a new facility here in Bismarck, North Dakota, for the sake of training young women to be courageous teachers in this state. The sisters will educate the younger generation to be fully alive through truth and discipline. The sisters' life of devotion and joy will make a positive difference in your community. Check out what we're up to, see what's going on, and join our mission to make a difference in the lives of the children of North Dakota.
Ashley, North Dakota is where life moves a little slower, but never gets dull. From hunting, camping, and fishing to safe streets where kids can be kids, this is the best of small town living. And Ashley offers everything you need, from healthcare to hardware to countless ways to stay active. Here, we've invested in our future with major upgrades to roads, parks, and education. Whether you're here for the day or here for life, you'll find Ashley's where you ought to be.
There's never been a better time to rediscover the style, reliability, and all-season, all-terrain fun of the all-new Nissan lineup at the new and improved Ryan Nissan. Whether it's the sleek and stylish Murano, the adventure-ready Pathfinder, or the reimagined, ready-for-anything 2026 Rogue, the all-new Ryan Nissan has the vehicle of your dreams at a price perfect for any budget. It's time to rediscover your passion for the road. It's time to rediscover the all-new Ryan Nissan, engineered to endure.
Welcome back to Open Range. I'm your host, Gary Emineth, talking to the Managing Director of the Watchdog Network, Dustin Gawrylow, about extra territorial, I call them zones, you call them areas, but let's just talk about growth in general, because growth's good. It helps all kinds of things. It gets you more retail, it gets you more aquatic center, or whatever that goes on. How is Bismarck managing all of this and just getting around Burleigh County? And is this kind of happening? Obviously Western North Dakota continues to have growth because of the oil industry as it is. What are you seeing related to this impact?
Well, all of the major cities in North Dakota and all cities in general in America are struggling with this exact issue in their own ways. Bismarck, if you compare Bismarck and Fargo, which are the two cases that I know the most about, Fargo has relied on a lot of debt in order to build out. Fargo, I believe, has over $1 billion in debt, including all special assessment obligations. And Bismarck is in the 200 and some million dollar range, because Bismarck has been very reluctant to take on debt, maybe in some cases too reluctant, but I guess it's better to be too reluctant to take on debt than too eager to take it on. And so Bismarck is actually, despite the fact that it doesn't really have a handle on ensuring that that growth pays for itself, it also has not used an excessive leverage to build that growth. Fargo has way over leveraged itself on building that out, and they almost have gotten to the point where they just can't catch up with their own situation. So Bismarck's more of a Goldilocks situation where we don't have a solution for the problem just yet, but the problem isn't an out of control reaction. Fargo is kind of in this out of control reaction where they just have to keep building because they're growing, and they don't have the ability to really look at long term what to do. Ironically, this was one of Doug Burgum's pet issues before he became governor. And it's one of the issues that he was pushing prior to his time as governor that I'm kind of on the same page of, and most conservatives probably aren't, because we're talking about what used to be called urban sprawl. And traditionally, conservatives didn't think that that was a problem. But now we're seeing that it is a problem, because if the growth doesn't pay for itself, you're not actually growing the tax base enough to compensate for that growth. And if you can't compensate for the growth, it's actually bad growth. So growth for growth's sake is bad. Growth that pays for itself and can pay for, the rest of the town's overall health is good.
Let me ask you a question. So Chad Walker's got the development, Silver Ranch, I think it's called. So he's out there. Is he in the ETZ?
No, he's annexed into Bismarck.
So he's annexed in the city of Bismarck. So talk about that being good or bad, just the context of it.
So when that property was brought in, the city was just changing its rules to ensure that the developer ended up paying more of the cost for bringing them in. The way that is kind of set up, if the city was running by its old rules where they subsidize essentially everything, or if they were running off of the rules that Fargo uses, that would probably have been a problem development, because the rest of the area isn't going to fill in as quickly as it needs to pay for the services and the extra strip of road. But because the Wachters and the city came to a solution as to ensure that the private side of it was paying for more of it, that may be a wash. We don't really know. There's not real good accounting on this. A lot of it is gut reaction. But when we have to raise taxes to pay for the arterial roads to get to the growing areas, that's all we need to know to say that those growing areas aren't paying for themselves, because if they were, we wouldn't have to raise the tax to get there.
So in your case of it is, you got these $400,000 or $750,000 million homes going on out in these areas, and that $200,000 home in Bismarck's having to subsidize, and that's the rub.
Yeah,
that's the rub. That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you just a different question. Maybe you're a little familiar with. What about Mandan? I've always thought it's just lost opportunity over there. Bismarck just gets everything, and is it Mandan's leadership? Because there's a lot of good stuff over there. It's great. You got nice rolling hills south of Mandan, and you got along the river to the north, and there is some development. But is it people who want to live there? Is it the attitude of this county, Morton County, versus Mandan City? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, if you look at Mandan's growth, their growth is in the higher end areas on the fringe, down by the river, and then up on the west side on the hills, so they are growing very quickly there. Mandan's always had an inferiority problem, which is that they Their property taxes traditionally are 25% higher than Bismarck's, and it's very difficult to compete. So the actual home sales price has to be lower in Mandan to compete.
Let me interrupt you for. So you're saying Mandan's property taxes, as a rule, are 25% higher than Bismarck's?
Yeah. When I was living there and running,
I didn't know that.
When I ran for school board in 2011 in Mandan, the mill levy in Mandan was 25% higher than in Bismarck's. And so the average home price was lower because it's a pay now or pay later type of structure. I haven't updated that number recently, but historically that was the case.
That's incredible. So let's just, for a little bit more, we were talking a little bit about Fargo, and I mean, there's definitely, I just came through there last week. It's exploding. Every time I turn around, there's just more houses everywhere. I mean, that's happening here in Bismarck too, but Fargo's really got something going on, I have to say.
Yeah. And Fargo, because they're more willing to leverage that debt, they're more willing to build out, say, 46 Ave South before there's growth there. So Bismarck tends to not build the infrastructure, the arterial infrastructure, until the growth is there. Fargo builds the infrastructure to push the growth to where they think that it's best suited. And so Fargo has more of a field of dreams approach to development, which is if you build it, they will come, and they have. The problem is they are severely leveraged on the debt side, and ultimately that's going to become a problem if they keep going down the road that they've been going.
So when you take Fargo, the big data center that's being talked about, and a lot of that growth, I mean, they don't have oil, but they got really good farmland and a lot of wealthy people in eastern North Dakota. Do you think that's fine? I mean, if you take $1 billion to 200, million in Bismarck, I mean, there is a lot higher property values. I don't know what the house prices are in Fargo compared to Bismarck. Are they about a wash?
It's very similar on the per unit cost.
Okay.
The overall, yes, they have more property, so they have more ability to leverage, but so the numbers have shifted because in the last 3 years there's been a huge jump in valuations. But in 2020, when I compared the two cities, Bismarck was the amount of debt that a city can take on is based on the total taxable property, and the limit is 10% total. Absolute limit is 10%. In 2020, Bismarck was at 3.2%, and Fargo was at 8.8%.
Wow.
And so that takes
Almost
into
triple.
account how much bigger the city and how much more value there is there. Those numbers are both lower now because valuations have gone up so rapidly. I think Fargo's now at like the 6.5, 7 range, simply because the taxable value has gone up, and projects like the data center certainly help that. But when you hear that they're going to spend $1 billion on a data center, that's not the building. That's all the stuff in the building, and the city can only recoup on the building and the property development. What gets put in the building is not taxed because we don't have taxes on that sort of thing. In fact, we have tax exemptions on that, and they get away with not paying sales tax on the equipment that they put into the building. So we're actually subsidizing the data centers directly from that aspect.
Yeah, probably most of it's coming from China.
Yeah.
So we got a few more minutes. Let's talk property tax a little bit. What's going on? What's your take on all that?
Well, we are already hearing a lot of complaints from local government on the 3% cap. We are hearing that the Association of Counties is considering taking a position of asking the legislature in the special session to do something to revise this already, even though we don't even have a full year of things in the books. We do need to tweak some of the rules. Like Burleigh County is concerned about how our sales tax for law enforcement, which is designed to reduce our property taxes, we could end up getting punished because we were proactive on that issue. So ensuring that the original baseline is part of that 3% baseline so that we don't get hit in year 3 and 4 with basically, much lower ability to tax on the rest of the property tax is critical. But, people are still upset. And we're going to see in the next 2 years how the implementation of this policy passed actually trickles down. If people see the benefit that they have been told that they're going to see, it's very clear that very few people are going to see the full $1,600 benefit. that's going to get eaten up in a lot of cases because of the valuation increases. And it's yet to be seen what the result is. I do foresee that the next property tax scheme that the legislature puts in place is going to be a lot different than this one, simply because of what we're already seeing and how difficult it is to implement.
So that whole 3% cap, I saw some stuff coming out of Minot where they were against it. Mike Blessum, who I've had on the show, city council member, was against it, conservative, but his point was that you do put some restrictions on those cities, and it creates some challenges as when they come to kind of operate. 20 seconds, do you think there could be a property tax elimination initiative coming back in the near future, or are people just kind of going to sit on their hands?
There won't be one in 26. I would say higher chance in 28, but we really have to see how this current thing goes and where the economy goes, because the overall economy right now is not looking too great.
People are just up in the air. It's hard to get their head around. I'm going to have you back again. I appreciate you coming on and giving us some insight on that. So we've been talking to Dustin Gawrylow, Managing Director, Watchdog Network. I'm your host, Gary Emineth. Thanks for watching.
Now you can have the personalized forecast at your fingertips when you need it. Beck's exclusive Weather Insight is information tailored to you. Radar, weather alerts, forecasts, and videos. Download the free Weather on Beck News app. Search your app store now.
Come on in and experience small town hospitality and the personalized care that makes car buying a pleasure.
We know that every journey starts with the right car. Whether it's school drop-off, weekend road trips, or your daily commute, we have the right vehicle for you and your family.
With trusted brands, affordable prices, and a team that treats you like family, finding your next car has never been so easy.
We pride ourselves on personal attention and quality service. Bassett Motors, where our customers send their friends.
Welcome to Arrowhead Cleaners. Newly renovated, modernized, and ready to make your cleaning needs hassle-free. From commercial and residential wash and fold laundry services to the latest in professional dry cleaning techniques, we are dedicated to your unique needs, offering alterations, fabrications, and even custom hat making. So whether you're a busy professional, a family on the go, or even a rodeo champion, Arrowhead Cleaners is here to take your things from messed up to dressed up. Now celebrating our 64th year in Arrowhead Plaza.
Hi, I'm Scott Hennon, host of the What's on Your Mind program on Beck TV now. From Baker, Montana to St. Cloud, Minnesota, and everywhere in between. We're looking forward to having a conversation with you about what matters most. We're talking to newsmakers from members of Congress to the state legislature, and most importantly, the good folks that make up the great state of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Montana. Every single day, you get a chance to tell us what's on your mind. And now you can watch What's on Your Mind live on Beck TV. Tune in 10 a.m. live for What's on Your Mind.
We are ladies of another view. Join us every weekday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. as we discuss the big topics from North Dakota, the nation, and around the world.
We chat with everyone from celebrities and medical professionals to politicians, local business owners, and neighbors about the topics and stories that affect all of us.
We are unscripted and uncensored real news from real people. So join us every weekday morning for Ladies of Another View on Beck.
Hey y'all, it's Trent on the loose. Join me on the trip and unearth the stories on how we maintain a domestic supply of food and fuel for future generations of American citizens like our forefathers did.